Besides,
Mr. Finn said, then put his hands on his shades to lift them.
there are many more interesting ways to view the world. Wouldn't you agree, Ms. Mercury?
What do you mean, nothing?
I mean nothing, Dallas.
I inserted my ruby earrings, loving how they matched my rose petal-themed dress hugging my curves. The enormous bathroom vanity allowed me to see my full body as I swirled and twirled, wishing I was allowed to bring my phone to take a photo. My followers on the hottest new app, Instagram, were definitely missing out tonight. I could also see the reflection of Dallas twiddling with his thumbs on my bed. Knowing him, he was probably more antsy without his phone than I was. Finally delighted with my appearance, I walked back to the room and struck a pose.
How do I look?
Stunning, of course, but his validation never hurt. He glanced up and looked at me from head to toe.
You look like one of the rare few who never skips leg day.
Take the compliment. Dallas rose to his feet, looking quite dapper in his all-black tuxedo I picked out for him.
Tell me more about this blind guy you met.
Like I said, nothing came from him when he spoke.
I continued to explain.
It was as if a switch just suddenly turned off. So fucking weird.
Well,
Dallas began, rubbing his chin.
how often do you have conversations with disabled people?
I gave it a quick thought.
Before him, I can't recall. What are you saying?
Maybe your signs whatever doesn't respond to disabled people.
He surmised.
I can't think of any other reason than that.
Possibly. Or maybe because he was so abnormally fine.
Dallas raised his eyebrow.
If that were the case, then you shouldn't be able to read me.
He laughed at his attempt at humor while I continued giving it more thought. What Dallas said may have had some truth to it. Maybe my synesthesia didn't react to people like him. It wasn't like I was ever in close proximity with many people with disabilities, so there was never a chance for me to test that out. I shoved the man to the back of my mind and we exited my room. The final event of the night was the casino-themed dinner party in the ballroom. An array of roulette, poker, and blackjack tables were scattered across the grandiose ballroom. Everyone was dressed in their Sunday best, emitting a wild assortment of hazes. As Dallas and I walked deeper into the bustling party, a haze of mustard yellow bombarded me as men spun their heads to look in my direction. I leaned into Dallas's ear.
Aren't you glad you walked in next to the most beautiful woman in the room?
Dallas turned his head to face me.
What do you mean? I'm here with you.
I scrunched my face to give him a cheeky grin, and we continued further into the ballroom. Light jazz was playing, increasing the sophistication of the ambiance. Besides the creeping eyes on me, I was definitely loving the vibe.
The prodigal daughter returns.
A voice said, followed by a hearty laugh. We turned to the voice to see Dad dressed in his usual pink and black pinstripe suit with his arm wrapped around Tessa's waist, who was also wearing a pink and black dress. When his eyes met Dallas's, a subtle red hue mixed with his emerald green.
Mr. Darton.
Dad greeted. Dallas nodded his head.
Mr. Angelopoulos.
The tension mounting from the two was palpable from their opposing hazes. Dallas put his hand on the small of my back, leaned in, and whispered.
I'm going to go mingle. See you soon.
He turned to face my dad and Tessa and gave them a nod, sauntering away into the party. Dad flitted his eyes towards Dallas, following him as he blended into the crowd. Tessa gently held Dad's face and turned it to face her.
Babe, let's play roulette.
Dad blinked a few times as if snapping out of trance, then smiled at his wife.
Most definitely.
He turned to me.
Mercury, have some fun.
He rummaged into his pocket and pulled out a small wad of US $100 bills, probably adding up to $10,000. My face made a sour look as I received his allowance and put it in my matching purse. The pair turned toward the nearest roulette table, and to my surprise, followed close behind them was Louisa in a pink and green floral dress. Of course, she would be tailing my father like a lost puppy. Louisa's eyes kept to the floor as she followed Dad.
Now, what should I do to pass the time? Might as well have some fun on Daddy's dime.
I spent the money Dad gave me on a shit ton of chips and looked for the nearest Texas Hold'em poker table. Texas Hold'em was never a game I was particularly good at, but my lack of experience was made up in other areas. Walking over to an empty chair at a poker table, I took my seat and saw that 3 men were already assembled. There was another spot available, and its space was occupied by a glass of wine. A man in his 60s, who appeared to be the dealer, began shuffling the cards.
Everyone ready?
He asked while shuffling.
Let's get this show on to...
Pardon me.
Softly rolling in was the blind man from the sauna. He was being pushed by one of the casino attendants. She scooted him in the empty space that held the glass of wine, then handed the glass to him. He took a light sip and placed it back down on the table. Since he was sitting directly across from me, from my point of view, it looked like he was staring at me. Obviously he couldn't be, but it still gave me the creeps nonetheless. As the attendant walked away, the man tilted his head back.
Thank you so much for your help, Layla.
She blushed.
It was my pleasure, Mr. Finn.
The dealer looked slightly irritated.
Now are we ready to play?
The blind man pulled out a deck of playing cards from his blazer pocket.
Would you mind using these cards instead?
Still facing me, he pulled out the deck and extended it to the dealer.
I had to run and get Braille-marked cards. I hope this is of no inconvenience.
The dealer took the cards from the man and examined them. Satisfied, he began shuffling the cards, then dealt them to us accordingly. After he finished dealing, I looked at my hand and was immediately disgusted. Of course, I started off with a pair. Thank God I was playing with house money. The game proceeded, and I immediately knew I was in way over my head. Since everyone was stoically quiet, I could not get a read on them, but the handsome blind man was the contrary. He would joke, laugh, and give somewhat funny anecdotes which made me and the other men smile or even laugh. Even though I couldn't read him, his constant jabbering helped me to read the other players to see the subtle changes in their hazes. After a few rounds of making educated calls and bluffs, the other gentleman folded, and it was just him and I. I knew it would come to this.
Let's make this last round fun, my dear.
That trademark smile crept on his face.
All in?
I laughed before sliding my haul of chips into the pot.
All in.
We showed our hands.
Straight flush. The winner goes to the gentleman to my right.
The dealer announced. Everyone, including myself, serenaded the man with a gentle golfer's clap. I was a little upset that I lost to a blind man, but it was still fun to blow Dad's money. The man smiled and bowed his head to the crowd. A little later, I found myself at the casino bar, casually babysitting a margarita. Dad could be seen putting on a show at the roulette table, dancing and cheering every time he won.
Such a showboat.
Mind if I join you?
Humph.
I almost broke my neck trying to turn around. It was the blind man again. Geez, he should invest in a cowbell on his wheelchair with his poker earnings. He continued giving me his usual smile, and I returned it with a smile of my own. That once creepy smile was starting to grow on me.
Have a seat.
I invited, then thought about what I said.
I mean, sure you can join me.
I stood up to move the bar stool next to me for him to roll into the spot. Then I sat back down to face him. He was still holding his glass of wine from earlier. Even though he lacked a haze, there was something else emanating from him.
That cologne you're wearing, what fragrance is it? It's divine.
My nose tickled with delight from the spicy smell.
Oh, it's nothing special.
The man responded, then outstretched his arm to put down his drink.
It's a blend I created based on a fragrance that is no longer in distribution. Ginger essence is what it's called.
You'll have to give me a bottle of this ginger essence before we depart.
Play your cards right, my dear, and I just might.
I sensed a tone of flirtation from him. Then he took a sip from his glass. I pulled my hair back and lightly giggled.
I'm never playing any card games with you again.
He spat out some of his wine as he let out a belly-aching laugh, which made me join him in laughter. Wine dribbled down his mouth as he attempted to compose himself. While still laughing, I leaned closer to him.
Here,
I picked up a napkin from the bar.
let me help you.
I dabbed at his firm jaw and wiped off the residual wine as we were coming down from our laughing fit. Tossing the napkin back onto the bar, I leaned back to my seat, but this time crossed my right leg over the left, exposing my thigh.
Now you have no choice but to repay me.
I purred, and began playing with my right earring.
Repay you I shall, but first.
The man began, then outstretched his arm to me.
My name is Kenny Finn, and it is a pleasure to make your acquaintance.
I sighed annoyingly before lightly shaking his hand.
Mercury Angelopoulos.
Once anyone heard my last name, they immediately thought of my dad, the prodigal son, Ilios Angelopoulos. It was always so frustrating, but it was something I had gotten used to. I was sure that this Kenny Finn fellow would tremble at the feet for me to introduce him to my father, or should I have said shaking at the wheels.
Mercury Angelopoulos, huh?
Here we go.
Such a beautiful name. Mercury, the first planet from the sun. And from your last name, I'm guessing you're Greek?
I immediately hoped he had a functioning penis.
Yes, I am, and I see you're rather cultured.
Mr. Finn rolled back and forth in his chair.
I get around.
Once again, he put me in another laughing fit. This man was something else. I wiped the tears from my eyes, then took a sip from my margarita.
So, Ms. Mercury, do you play the guitar?
I chuckled.
I wonder how this pickup line ends.
He grinned.
It's just that I noticed your fingers are calloused. In my field, that indicates you dabble in some sort of artistry.
I blushed as I thought about my response.
I dabble.
Is that what brings you here, Mercury?
I could just barely hear Dad behind me as Mr. Finn had my full attention.
Not really. Just enjoying what the Intercontinental has to offer. Yourself?
Mr. Finn smiled,
That's a secret.
then took another swig from his glass.
But I will tell you that I'm interested in the auction.
Oh? Are you some sort of fine art connoisseur?
You could say that. I more or less collect whatever catches my eye.
I chuckled, thinking that he was making another blind joke only to see his face more stoic rather than light-hearted from before. I let out a little cough to mask some of the shame he couldn't see.
Anything in particular from the catalog that you want?
I asked curiously. Mr. Finn flashed his smile again.
I'll know it when I see it, my dear.
Gotcha.
Skeptical?
A little. I don't know if I should take what you say as jokes or if you really are blind. Now that I think about it, how did you even know I was sitting here?
Mr. Finn downed his wine, then placed the empty glass on the bar,
You're wearing a body mist from Chanel, yes?
piquing my interest.
Yes, and?
I could practically taste your fragrance at the poker table.
Mr. Finn answered.
Your scent led a trail over here, and it also helped that I could hear a woman huffing and puffing as if she were being bothered. Putting two and two together, especially after losing our game, it had to be you, Ms. Mercury.
I was slightly impressed with his deduction. My huffing and puffing was more so towards my gloaty father, but Mr. Finn's assessment was rather spot on.
Touché.
I responded, and pretended to tip an imaginary hat.
Besides,
Mr. Finn said, then put his hands on his shades to lift them.
there are many more interesting ways to view the world. Wouldn't you agree, Ms. Mercury?
Staring into his foggy gray eyes, I had to swallow my crow.
I apologize, Mr. Finn.
Please call me Kenny.
My apologies.
Kenny, there you are.
A British woman called out. Quickly approaching was a woman who looked to be in her late 20s, wearing an unflattering purple dress exposing what little cleavage she had. Her brunette hair was in a neat pixie cut that matched the brown of her eyes. Bringing it all together were her large, brown-rimmed glasses. The woman was finally at Kenny's side.
I'm so sorry, Mom.
She began.
Was my husband bothering you? He tends to do that.
Husband? Well, fuck. Just when things seemed to go my way. Even though the woman had a smile on her face, her haze said otherwise. It was a light dance of raspberry that showed that she was threatened. Honey, I haven't given you any reason to feel threatened. Yet. I cocked my head.
Your husband makes for great conversation, so please don't apologize on his behalf.
Kenny turned his head to face his wife.
See, my dear, I told you I could be charming.
Kenny's wife grabbed his handlebars and began backing him away from the bar.
How about we use that charm on the slot machines,
She turned to face me,
You have a good evening, Mom.
and just like that, I was alone again as I watched them fizzle into the party. I thought back to the conversation I had with Kenny. The way he laughed and smiled during our exchange made me feel like every word I uttered held weight. My words, the elixir to a parched soul. My presence, the only thing that mattered in a sea of pompous opulence. Aura or no aura, this warm feeling was nice, a welcome distraction. But my mind went back to what was to come. The anticipated day couldn't come soon enough.